Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly epic story. And, this isn't your typical tale of swords and shields. No, this is about words, it's about memory, and it's about one man's absolute, unyielding mission to save a culture's ancient identity from literally being erased forever.
So let's kick things off with a pretty provocative question. 30. What would you be willing to dedicate 30 years of your life to? Seriously, think about it. Day in, day out, enduring hardship, total exhaustion, all for one single unwavering goal. Keep that number, 30, in the back of your mind as we journey through this explainer. Section 1, A 1,000-Year Legacy. Let's talk about this great Iranian poet. Meet Ferdowsi was born, lived his entire life, and eventually died in the city of Tus, which is located near Mashhad in modern-day Iran. And get this, it all happened roughly 1,000 years ago. I mean, just let the sheer weight of that timeline sink in for a second. A whole millennium. But who was the man behind the myth? Well, our source tells us Ferdowsi was deeply patriotic. He harbored this immense, profound love for the ancient history of Iran. And this wasn't just some casual passing interest, This was a defining, burning passion that would literally dictate the entire course of his existence. Section 2, The Epic of Kings. Let's look at how he went about preserving that history. Because how exactly do you save a beloved history that's on the brink of fading away completely? Well, he did it by creating the Shahnameh. This was his absolute life's work. Shahnameh roughly translates to the Epic of Kings. For this project, Ferdowsi painstakingly tracked down scattered stories of ancient kings, legendary heroes, and myths, and he wove them all together into one massive, magnificent book of poetry. The crucial thing to understand here is that this wasn't just another poetry book meant to gather dust on a shelf. This was quite literally a cultural lifeline. Through this incredible text, he successfully refamiliarized all Iranians with their own epic heritage. He preserved an entire civilization's memory at a time when their identity was incredibly vulnerable to being lost. Section 3, Legends of the Shahnameh. Let's dive into these epic narratives. Inside this colossal work are the essential stories that really form the absolute bedrock of Persian mythology. The source text explicitly highlights the heavy hitters here. You've got the tragic, heroic tale of Rustam and Sohrab, the deep romance of Bijan and Manija, and of course, the legendary love story of Zal and Rutabe. Now, these specific stories, they were so much more than just entertaining myths to pass the time. They were vital cultural treasures. These are the exact stories Ferdowsi was desperately fighting to rescue from the sands of time, making absolutely sure they'd be passed down from generation to generation. Section 4, 30 Years of Strife. Now we get to the immense personal cost. Check out this incredibly powerful quote translated straight from those handwritten English notes we saw earlier. Ferdowsi writes, "For 30 years I endured much pain and strife. I awakened the Asham with the Iranian identity." Wow, that perfectly captures the sheer agony, the bone-deep exhaustion, and ultimately the triumph of reviving the Parsi language and the Iranian cultural identity. 30 entire years of relentless dedication. Because of this unimaginable sacrifice, Ferdowsi made a pretty bold poetic declaration in his writing. He wrote that he wouldn't truly die. He honestly believed he'd remain alive through his work, because he had scattered what he called the eternal seeds of speech. He basically conquered mortality by planting words that were destined to outlast his physical body. And he didn't stop there. Ferdowsi noted his firm belief that anyone possessing intelligence, wisdom, and religion would send praise upon him long, long after his death. He knew exactly what he was doing. He recognized the monumental value of the cultural gift he was handing to future generations. Section 5, The Immortal Poet. Let's look at his lasting legacy today. So, the big question, did his work survive? The source text confirms it absolutely did. Today, a full 1,000 years later, his tomb remains a highly significant site in Tuscus. In fact, tons of people who travel to the nearby major city of Mashhad make a specific, dedicated detour just to visit the resting place of this great poet. The text concludes by stating plainly that Iranians deeply love Ferdowsi for this immense service to Iran. I mean, they still read his epic, they still tell the stories of Rustam and Sohrab, and yes, they still send praise upon him a full millennium later. His 30 years of pain truly did awaken an identity that has never gone back to sleep.
Long ago, according to ancient Persian myth, the world enjoyed an era of absolute peace. Under the rule of King Jamshed, the realm of Iran was prosperous, content, and decorated like an endless, beautiful garden. This harmony drew the attention of Ahriman, the devil. He targeted a young man named Zahhak, the son of a perfectly just Arab ruler. Ahriman saw an opportunity to exploit the prince's ambition, appearing to him in the disguise of a friendly youth. Intrigued, Ahriman gained Zahhak's trust through his appetite. He became the prince's personal chef, preparing increasingly rich, exotic, and delicious meals that slowly cultivated a total dependence on his presence. Once Zahhak was completely under his influence, Ahriman asked for a single modest reward: to kiss the young ruler on his shoulders. Zahhak agreed. Ahriman planted the kiss and immediately vanished into thin air. The collapse of this golden age required no massive invasion. Instead, an entity understood that the surest way to dismantle a civilization was to quietly manipulate the ego of its future leader. The true nature of Ahriman's kiss revealed itself immediately. Two massive, terrifying black snakes grew directly out of Zahhak's shoulders. Every time the panicked king tried to have them cut off, they instantly regrew, bursting from his flesh, over and over again. The best physicians in the kingdom were completely baffled. No earthly medicine worked. Then a highly skilled doctor arrived, claiming to have a solution. It was Ahriman, returning in yet another disguise. His diagnosis was horrific. To stop the serpents from biting, they had to be fed human brains every single day. Ahriman had successfully turned the king into a predator of his own people, driving the human race toward total extinction. Zahhak ruled through this dark mandate for many years, but his tyranny faced a new threat. He had a paralyzing nightmare of a boy named Fereydun striking him down with a heavy mace. Paranoia now dictated Zahhak's every move. Driven by the fear of this child, he began a systematic campaign of mass murder, turning his entire empire into a search and destroy operation for a single boy. Zahhak's frantic hunt for the child resulted in the capture and execution of Fereydun's father, a man named Aptin. Knowing her son was next, Fereydun's mother, Faranok, fled to a secret meadow. There, the infant was kept alive by the milk of a marvelous, uniquely patterned cow named Barmea. As the Hawk's forces closed in, Faranok was forced to move again. She abandoned the lowlands entirely, carrying her son up into the distant peaks of the Alborz Mountains to leave him with a pious hermit. The survival of the realm now rested on a mother's grit and a hidden child. Faranok's persistence proved that even the most efficient police state can be undermined by a single determined anomaly. 16 years passed. Fereydun grew strong in the mountains, while in the capital, a paranoid Zahhak summoned his nobles. He forced them to sign a legal document testifying that his reign was just and righteous. The nobles complied, but the ceremony was interrupted by Kaveh the Blacksmith. He burst into the royal court, demanding the king answer for his crimes. Kaveh had already lost 17 of his 18 sons to the king's serpents. Now guards had come for his last remaining child. Zahhak, fearing the blacksmith's public rage, released the final son, but he immediately handed Kaveh the document, demanding he sign the false testimony of the king's justice. In a court defined by forced silence and scripted compliance, Kaveh's refusal stood alone. Zahhak found himself unable to silence one man's grief without exposing the illegitimacy of his own law. Kaveh refused to be complicit. He tore the decree to shreds in front of the throne and berated the nobles for their cowardice. He walked directly into the marketplace and tied his leather blacksmith's apron to a spear. This work-worn piece of equipment became a rallying banner for the city. The citizens unified behind this makeshift flag and set off to find the prophesied Fereydun. When they found the young hero, Fereydun officially adopted the apron as their banner, adorning the leather with jewels and naming it the Darafsh-e-Kaviani. This humble apron became the most sacred banner in Persian history. The empire's highest symbol of justice began its life as the soot-stained equipment of a common laborer. Before going to war, Fereydun ordered the blacksmiths to forge a heavy iron mace.
It was topped with the head of a cow to honor the creature that had kept him alive. The rebel army marched on the capital and infiltrated the palace while Zahhak was away on a campaign. Zahhak returned to find his own capital in revolt. The people he had terrorized for years were now rioting in the streets, overwhelming his royal guard. Fereydun captured the tyrant, but refused to grant him a quick death. He bound Zahhak in eternal chains deep within a cave on Mount Damavand. Zahhak remained bound and forgotten in the depths of the mountain, while the realm returned to the people. The blacksmith's apron had outrun the serpent's crown.
The long reign of the tyrant Zahhak has come to an end. After a massive conflict, the new leader, Fereydun, stands over his defeated predecessor, marking the first moment of a total shift in power. By ensuring Zahhak is physically incapable of response, he creates the necessary security for the political transition that follows. Once the tyrant is bound, Fereydun faces a logistical problem. What is the protocol for his permanent removal? Rather than opting for an immediate public execution, the text describes a strategy of total isolation, removing the former ruler from the sight of the people entirely. To facilitate the transport, Zahhak is wrapped tightly in hides and slung over the back of a horse, fully neutralized and ready for the long journey away from the capital. This capture leaves the throne empty, but the danger remains as long as the tyrant is within the city walls. The next step is to physically separate the source of the old regime from the society it once controlled. The bound tyrant is carried out of the city, heading toward the remote wilderness. It is a rough, physical journey that takes the old order further away from the center of civilization with every mile. This severing. By moving Zahhak to such a remote peak, Fereydun ensures the oppressor is literally removed from the map of the civilized world. This photograph shows the scale of choice. At over 18,000 feet, the snow-covered peak of Damavand is a place of profound isolation, an environment designed to be an inescapable prison. High on the slopes, Fereydun finds a remote cave. His final act of neutralization is to throw Zahhak deep into this mountain crevice. The cave functions as a permanent vault, locking the former ruler in the dark and sealing away the remnants of his regime. With the tyrant literally buried within the mountain, the physical era of his oppression is finished. The slate is now clear for Fereydun to return to the city and begin his own rule. The scene now shifts away from the dark, cold mountain cave and back to the bright center of the capital city. Fereydun's first act as the new leader is not a military one, but a diplomatic one. He formally gathers the society's elders. This meeting stands in direct contrast to the actions in the mountains. Where there were once ropes and caves, there is now an assembly and an open dialogue. Fereydun's approach signals a change in the source of power. He moves from the unilateral violence used to capture the tyrant to a model that seeks the engagement of the community's leadership. Standing before the elders, Fereydun opens the session by giving thanks for the overthrow of the old regime, acknowledging the end of the conflict. He then outlines the 3 principles that will define his new rule: goodness, truth, and the worship of Yazdan. These 3 pillars are presented as the specific replacements for the tyranny that came before. Fereydun gives the elders their first instructions. They are to give thanks for the change, return to their homes, and live their lives in a state of calm. The new regime is built on this spoken covenant. By replacing fear with a public commitment to truth and peace, Fereydun begins to stabilize the social order. The response from the people is immediate. The populace rejoices, the new decrees are followed, and the chaos of the transition begins to settle into a stable order. With the society stabilized, Fereydun formally takes the royal throne, dedicating his reign to the practice of justice and generosity. The text concludes by stating that the custom of injustice was ended, and the world finally took rest. In this narrative, the struggle for a new era is a 2-part process. First, the physical removal of the tyrant, followed by the intentional establishment of a system based on justice.